This is my table that I use when I'm praying. I don't always light all the candles, but it's All Saints, and so I wanted to have all of them here and be all of us praying together. I wanted to share this with you because I got a new icon today from Father Sean. It is this one based on a illumination. You see Mary wrestling with the devil. She's handed off Jesus to an angel who has blonde hair, like hold my beer. It's the one with Hail Mary, full of grace, punch the devil in the face. And since I'm doing this, I'll go ahead and show you what else I've got here. I have this triptych with Mary holding Jesus and two angels, and this diptych here with Mary holding Jesus and then Jesus beside her. I have two icons of Jesus as Christ Pantocrator. And here, this isn't really an icon. It's an illumination of Jesus creating the world. Here is St. Christopher, my name saint. The dog-headed thing beside him is the Eastern version, because in that story, he's said to be one of the dog-headed people. It's very different than the Western version. We have St. Francis, San Expeditus, who may not actually exist, but the story is that he some relics were delivered to some nuns, and it said expedite, and so they thought that was the name of the saint, and so they started asking San Expeditus to pray for them to make things happen in the right amount of time. I have several Virgin of Guadalupes. There's this candle here. I really love these. And then I have two scapulars and something that was on a keychain at one time. Here is the Rublev's Hospitality of Abraham, believed to be depicting the Trinity. I can't remember where this Mary holding Jesus is from, and another one of Mary holding Jesus. For some reason, I have two candles of St. Jude, but as the patron saint of lost causes, he's a good one. This, by the way, is something that somebody in prison made me out of trash bags that he colored. It says, Et hoc transibit, which means, and this too shall pass. And then another one of Mary over here. So, happy All Saints Day.
Hello, and welcome to Moments with the Master. I'm here with the Reverend Lieutenant Colonel, Right Reverend Josh White, Charles Walker White, to speak about I'm actually going to be reading the readings for All Saints Day, which was, by the time you're watching this, would have been like 3 days ago. So Happy New Year. Happy Celtic New Year. We're recording this on Halloween, so I'm wearing my rosary made of skulls.
Nice. Memento.
Yes. Who's it's got Guadalupe on it too. Anyway, so the readings are Sirach, chapter 44, verses 1 through 15. There are two psalm choices. One is Psalm 149 and one is Psalm 24. The epistle, there are two New Testament readings possible. One is 1 John 3, 1 through 3, or Revelation chapter 7, verses 2 through 4 and 9 through 17. And then the gospel is Matthew 5, 1 through 12. I'm going to be reading the Sirach reading, but I wanted to touch on what the other ones were real quick. The Matthew reading is the Beatitudes. We were talking about, how to be a saint. This is it. That's the instructions. It's interesting to me how much focus there is on, in certain Christian circles, on the 10 Commandments, but which is mostly a list of things not to do, but there's not as much focus on the Beatitudes, I think, because the Beatitudes are much harder to live by. Being poor in spirit and meek and hungering and thirsting for righteousness, and being merciful and pure in heart and peacemakers.
Let me.
These are
Oh, go ahead and finish.
these are things that I just don't think that we want to do, and it's one of the reasons why we don't look very Christian. What were you saying?
I I preached. So as I was going through, this was years ago when I got to the Beatitudes, and I was going to do them in one sermon, and I started studying, and I was like, holy crap, there's a lot in this. So I wound up, I did 9 sermons on the Beatitudes, one on each one.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, blessed are the poor in spirit, as I studied it, what it means without getting into the weeds is like not just poor, but absolutely destitute, like poor in a way we don't understand, and so desperate that you would literally do anything, like to get your next meal was the word that they used, but poor, like for the kingdom of God, desperate. And and in my sermon, I was like, I realized that I'm not desperate like that. Like I want to be more like Jesus. I want God in my life, but I'm not desperate. And I don't think most American Christians are. And I'm like, I'm terrified to ask God for this type of desperation because I know what that means. And yet I cannot not do that. And so I did. I started praying for that. And a year later was when all the crap happened at that church.
Hmm.
And I realized partway in, oh my gosh, I did it again. I asked God for something and he gave me exactly what I asked for.
$1 million.
Yeah, that never happens. It's never the physical stuff. It's always
right.
It's like, anyway.
The Revelation reading is one of my favorites. It starts off with the people around the throne. Salvation belongs to our God,
Salvation
which is a song that I love.
To our
It has the second part, and then it talks about who are these robed in white and where did they come from. And he says these are the ones, the martyrs, basically the ones who came out of the great ordeal. They will hunger no more and thirst no more. It's a beautiful reading about worship in heaven. Actually, I kind of wish that the Catholic service had that song, that particular song, worked into their liturgy somewhere.
Yeah, that would be cool. And of course, that's only Catholic heaven, right? Because it doesn't show a view of Lutheran heaven, because we're not going to worship together, kind of like here on earth, right? We're all going to be in separate heavens.
Yes, like in that
that old joke.
Huh?
That the joke.
No. Have you seen I know you've seen it. What's the one with The Simpsons? And Marge is upset because Homer and Bart are like kind of converting to Catholicism, and she has this vision of heaven where she's in nice Protestant heaven and they're all golfing and they're wearing sweaters and stuff. And she looks over to Catholic heaven and they're like dancing jigs and getting in fist fights and anyway, it's pretty great. The first John verse is behold what manner of love the Father has given unto us. A great verse. Mm-hmm. They're all very singable. The two Psalms, Psalm 24 is, speaking of songs, it starts off with who shall ascend to the hill of the Lord, which is another one that, do you remember that one from back in Maranatha days?
Dude,
who shall ascend to the hill of the Lord. You don't remember that?
I do. I just don't remember how to sing it. It's been a while.
But then the second part of it is one of my favorites because it's part of the Easter liturgy. Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, ancient doors, that the King of Glory may come in. It's what Jesus says.
The King
he breaks down the doors of hell.
Who's the King of Glory?
That one I don't know.
Yeah,
we know too many
Messiah.
songs. Psalm 149 is about praising God. It's got that great verse, 149 verse 6. Let the praises of God be in their throats and the two-edged sword in their hands. Okay, but moving down to Sirach, because we don't get a chance to dip into the entirety of Scripture all the time.
Is that guy the creator of the red sauce that you can put on your Mexican food?
Sriracha, yes. That's how he's famous.
Yes.
Let us now praise famous men and our fathers in their generations. The Lord apportioned to them great glory, his majesty from the beginning. There were those who ruled in their kingdoms and were men renowned for their power, giving counsel by their understanding and proclaiming prophecies, leaders of the people in their deliberations, and an understanding of learning for the people, wise in their words of instructions, those who composed musical tunes and set forth verses in writing, rich men furnished with resources, living peaceably in their habitations. All these were honored in their generations and were the glory of their times. There are some of them who have left a name so that men declare their praise, and there are some who have no memorial, who have perished as though they had not lived. They have become as though they had not been born, and so have their children after them. But these were men of mercy, whose righteous deeds have not been forgotten. Their prosperity will remain with their descendants, and their inheritance to their children's children. Their descendants shall stand by their covenants, their children also for their sake. Their posterity will continue forever, and their glory will not be blotted out. Their bodies were buried in peace, and their names live to all generations. And their name lives to all generations. People will declare their wisdom, and the congregation proclaim their praise.
Sounds a little bit like Hebrews, the Hall of Faith passage.
Yes, it does.
12.
Odd that it's not paired with that. Now that you mention it,
thought the same thing. I was like, why would they not put that for this day?
Yeah. I love the verse. I remember encountering it early on. It was actually kind of foundational in the prologue to the Guthlike poem that I wrote, which I'm actually going to read, just the prologue part. And it's this idea: we need heroes in our lives, just like I was talking about the other day. And we say that we're a disenchanted generation, but that's not really the case. It's just that we're focused on a different way than religion. And we say that there's no saints because we're Protestant or we're not religious, but that's also not the case. We invariably lift up people.
Well, it's hilarious to me that people will say, "Oh yeah, saints," rah, 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 rah. And yet Billy Graham, Billy Sunday, everybody named Billy, I guess.
Not just them. It was interesting for me how much the often not Christian founding fathers were lauded as saints in our house. Because you had, George Washington was every bit as revered in our house as St. Francis would be in your average Roman Catholic household. Or as Chrysostom probably is, I guess, in Orthodox households, along with the other founding fathers. And then for people who aren't religious, you've got, or a lot of times who are, there are sports figures, there are currently political figures, and I'm not just talking about one side, I mean on all sides. There are people usually at the extremes. It's rarely the people in the middle. It's the people at the extremes that are elevated to saint-like status because of something. The devotion that people have to Bernie Sanders, to Senator Ocasio-Cortez, to the traffic cone of treason, to all of these people.
Well,
yeah. He hasn't had one yet, but I could see that happening in the next.
Well, I'm thinking about even on the Christian side. You remember Fox's Book of Martyrs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which was an interesting one because there was like the martyrs that everybody agreed on, and then it was like Protestant martyrs for the rest.
They were all mostly Protestant-like. There were some, like the actual Fox's Book of Martyrs. Really, I talked about Jesus and Stephen, and then kind of skipped about 1,500 years up to. Well, it went through
to Huss.
Well, yeah, John Huss and people who truly did great things. What's his Tyndall in England, and others who tried to translate the Bible into common languages. I like the more modern Jesus Freaks. Are you familiar with that one? That actually tries to fill in those gaps and talks about some other people, some of them from the Catholic perspective as well. But it is interesting to me that it's like Protestants who say, well, we don't believe in creeds, and yet they write their own things that they say in church every Sunday.
Yeah, you told me about the one that
about the Bible.
about the Bible one where people had to like stand up and say what was essentially a creed. Yeah. Speaking about what you talked about the other day, there's this portion, like when it's talking about the inheritance of the children. For me, it seems like it's talking about a inheritance of wealth, but in the context, it's actually more like an inheritance of faith. Men of mercy whose righteous deeds have not been forgotten, their prosperity will remain with their descendants, and their inheritance to their children's children. Their descendants stand by their covenants, their children also for their sake. Posterity will continue forever. It's something that you've seen in your own life, and the relationship that you cultivated with your children, and the righteousness that you lived with them. I think that is, to your question in the other video, that is what is not being done. Like when we're talking about the Beatitudes, it is the Christian life not lived that is not creating other saints.
Yeah, it's become almost like a completely didactic thing.
But it's belief.
I teach you propositional statements, but I don't live it with you. And when you look at the saints that we elevate, what did they do? What did St. Francis do? He lived among people. What did St. Patrick do? He lived among people. What did I could go down a long list. Saint Frickety Frack, Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa. She is a saint now, right?
She is a saint now.
Yeah, Saint Teresa. What did she do? She lived among people.
But even the ones who didn't live among people, the life, like Anthony of the desert, the life that he lived was so loud, like so blatantly, that people observed it, and then they sought him out to live with him and become saints with him. There's one of the most rich and weird traditions in history, in art history, is the Temptation of Anthony in the desert, and it's this guy sitting in like peace, sometimes lifted up in the air, and he's just surrounded by demons beating the crap out of him, and grotesquerie and all this stuff. There's just so many Bosque, Hiron Bosque's rendering of that, and not Picasso, Dali's rendering of it are just super strange. Anyway, but it takes that level of dedication and effort. I mean, if we're talking about a football player, for example, let's say that if being a saint isn't just what you believe, but it is a skill that you cultivate. If I'm looking at an excellent football player, that's a lifetime dedication. They don't just decide one day to be a football player and they're a football player. It takes practice and training and daily weight training and eating the right things and all this kind of stuff. And then they show this excellence, and then other people see it and they're like, I would like to do that same thing. And then they realize what is entailed in becoming that kind of excellence. Yes. So the issue is that we don't have people who are that. Let me take that back. The issue is that I am not living that excellence of faith, and so other people can't see it. And they don't desire it. They don't. I heard somebody say once that it would be better to say not what would Jesus do, but what would the saints do, because they show something that not that Jesus wasn't completely human, he was, but they show something that they show the process that it takes to become Christ-like, to actually gain the mind of Christ, and it's more than just belief. It's more than just belief. It's not just about getting into heaven. If yeah, so and it's that way. It's that way across the board. Anyway, there at the end part, this has nothing really to do with being a saint, but I thought it was interesting, and you'd like it. When it's talking about the people who were forgotten, do you know what the 98 rock is?
The what?
The 98 rock. Okay, so there was during World War II, Ireland occupied by the Japanese. They had prisoners of war there, and they heard a bunch of bombing, and they thought that the Americans were coming. So they brought out all 98 of their prisoners of war, and they were killing them on the beach. One of them was able to escape. So he comes back to, he escapes. He comes to a rock that was on the beach near where everybody got shot, and he carved a memorial for all 98 because he knew he was going to be captured and killed along with the rest of them. And so a memorial stands there for all 98, including him. Yeah, look up 98 Rock. It's a depressing story, actually.
Yeah.
But that is actually one of the things. Like, there is ancestor worship in much of the rest of outside of Christendom, and the idea is that you need to remember your family, so that they're not forgotten and they don't go off into oblivion. But here, it's not about remembering them so that they don't go off into oblivion. It's about remembering the heroes of our faith and elevating the heroes of our faith rather than political heroes or sports heroes, or focus on the living, which we do a lot. Like, how many people talk about Billy Graham anymore? He might have been a living saint. The only one that I can think of is maybe Lottie Moon, and I don't even think that she's spoken about much more in Baptist churches.
Every Christmas.
Every Christmas they do it? Okay.
Well, because the Christmas offering is named after her.
Gotcha.
The International Missions Offering.
So this is, before I read this, do you have something to add?
Well, let me just, I'll make a connection for you on the rock thing, because I love that idea. As you read the First Testament, every time God did something significant, they would raise up stones. We actually saw some of these when we were in Israel, standing stones. And the point being, and actually it says this, that whenever someone would pass by that area and the children would say, why is this here? They wouldn't do what we do and put like a plaque on it. They would just raise the stone up, and it was a remembrance of, hey, something significant happened here. God did something big here.
Right.
But it required the verbal passing on from generation to generation. So when I can't remember which one it is, it's more than once actually, but where God says, hey, raise up stones here so that when you pass by this way and your children say, why are these here? You can tell them this great thing I've done. Jump to 1 Peter, I think. Peter says, we are living stones, which is that thing. We are to be standing stones, witnesses to who God is and what God does. And I hadn't really, I guess, made this connection, because through our lives, we should be telling those things. But to make your connection, and I'm going to add this to when I teach this thing from now on, people should, as they pass by, be able to point at our lives and say, God did something significant here. Not look at how great Josh is, but look at how great God is.
Well, that was, yes. like when you talk about Mary and all of the devotion that and nigh worship that is given to her, it's not about anything that she did aside from saying yes. It is about what God did using her.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be our ultimate goal, is to be like Mary, to birth Christ into the world through our obedience. So this is the prologue from the soon to be famous epic on the life of Saint Guthlac. So let us now praise famous men, the father. This, by the way, taken directly from Sirach, the fathers of our faith, the saints who from their labors rest, now full of truth and grace. The Lord by them great glory wrought, by prophet, priest, and king, through virgin pure and martyr meek, the poor in spirit, silent, weak, through Roman, Hebrew, Celt, and Greek, in golden tongues that sing. They filled the earth with holiness, as bread is filled with leaven, as the Word once with his birth, in weakness laid aside his worth, thus dragging heaven down to earth, and earth with him to heaven. And there are those that we forget, as though they'd never been, but God remembers each one still, and still they are our kin. O ubi sancti Dei sunt, the blessed by God who blessed, the soldiers of the risen Son, who fought the fight of faith and won. Is there not left on earth just one? O sancte, ubi est, that's ubi sancti Dei sunt, where are the saints of God? O sancte, ubi est, O saint, where are you? By the way, that's based on a poem from Saint Ephrem the Syrian. This is like 4th century, and he's already writing about where are the saints of God, which of course he is. Though vulgar Cretans, here behold, their cloud surrounds us still, from prayers raised on Ninian's cave to Mary Hazel's holy grave, and Brendan's mass at Whale on Wave, all following God's will. The holy ones and watchers come, as we on Christ are fed. Iona's monks the dead paths race, while 6-winged seraphs hide their face, and singing Sanctus join in praise when God becomes the bread. The throne of God descends to earth, the temple veil is furled, all heaven surrounds us as we sup, prostrate before the holy cup, with wine and blood and God filled up, the center of the world. It's one of my favorite images, is that on every Mass, when the in the Catholic Mass, they have a bell that they ring when they
Ding, ding. Yes, that was the most shocking thing when I went to a Catholic a Roman Catholic Mass in.
Right.
It's like, what is this?
I love that part, but I love the idea that, you know, saints and angels are like, oh, it's happening, let's go, and they come down to worship with us, as Mary Hazel said when Father Sean was celebrating Mass, and it was just the two of them, and he was wondering what the point was, and she said, we are not alone, the saints and angels surround us. So anything else?
Nope.
Okay, so I'm going to say the words of my favorite saints, Hervé of Brittany. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I give you my heart, my soul, and my strength. Make me a good man.
Gaudeamus omnes in Domino, diem festum celebrantes, sub honore sanctorum omnium, de quorum solemnitate gaudent angeli, et collaudant filium Dei. Exultate just in Domino, rectos decet collaudatio. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancti, erat in principio et nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. Gaudeamus omnes in Domino, diem festum celebrantes sub honore Sanctorum omnium, de quorum sol